Welcome to 30 Talk with Chade and Friends. Log in each week for topics covering social, economic, and entertainment. It's time to talk 30.
Check. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is, excuse the background before we get started for those of you just logging on to Facebook, those of you just logging on YouTube. Excuse the background. We're in a little remodeling. Boilers getting fixed and all kinds of stuff is happening. So this is our first 30 Talk, right? So it's something that we said we are going to do for a while. We have a lot of different issues to talk about. And we're just going to bring on some of my friends, people that I know, some people that I've met, over time, and talk about a lot of different issues that's basically going on in our communities, right? So our first person that's here, and I want to talk about, I've known her for a very, our first panelist, I've known her for a very long time, right? I think since my college days, and so some of you would understand that's a very long time ago. But her name is Sharon Spencer, right? And we're talking education today. Today's show is all about education. So Sharon began her career in 2000 as a biology teacher at St. Michael's Academy in New York. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from Manhattan, right? From Manhattan College. So we talked about, when we talked before, we talked about her interest in biology and especially with what's happening now. She has her master's degree, right? And she was presented the opportunity to move into the charter school system. So in 2012, she became a founding assistant principal at New Vision's Charter High School for Advanced Math and Science. But I can talk about her all day long. I'd like to bring her on just for a second so she can talk about herself for a little bit, right? And then we're going to get into who our other guests are, right? So Sharon, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you there? All right. Hey, everyone say hi to Sharon. Say hi to Sharon. I say hi.
Hello.
All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started, Sharon. So like we don't want people to think that we're just talking to people who just have opinions or not like really knowledgeable about what we're talking about, right? So just give them a little background about yourself.
Sure. I've been in education for about 20 years now, starting out as a classroom teacher, going all the way up the ranks to principal. And really right now I'm focused on family and doctorate. So I'm actually working on my doctorate. Hopefully this is my last year, looking at organizational leadership in terms of how genders learn differently depending on the gender of the teacher in front of them. I hold 2 masters. I'm a mom, working from home. So you may hear some rattling in the background. That's just all part and parcel of remote learning. I'm home, they're home. So half the day is hush, 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 get your work done. But, it's really just my passion to work with young people of all ages. And it's a pleasure to be here on the show.
Awesome. So that's our first guest. So we have, and this is so amazing, right? Because everybody knows my love for education. And we happen to have another great, I want to say educator here with us today. Her name is Chana Comer. She's a master STEM educator and lover of science. So we have like 2 women of science here today, which is absolutely awesome, right? So she has worked with students from elementary to high school. She's passionate about helping to see them through a world with new scientific lens. So this is so awesome. I know I'm gonna have to bring both of them back again on another show for where we're talking about girls and science, especially like females in science, right? So I have a great bio here for her, but it's nothing like hearing the person. People don't like to talk about themselves or big up themselves, So I'm gonna bring Miss Comer on. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, she is here. So just tell people a little bit about yourself. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi. So I'm an educator for the last 13 years. I work for the Department of Education currently, teaching middle school science. Like you said, I love science, and my goal is to help students see themselves as scientists and see the world around them through a scientific lens. I consider myself a scientist, and I think we all are scientists. I've worked with students from elementary all the way up through kindergarten, actually, all the way up through high school. I've been doing middle school now for about 9 years now, and that's kind of my niche. That's my favorite age to work with in terms of students. And I just love being here. I'm happy to be able to talk. I'm very passionate about increasing student learning, particularly in this environment of remote learning, and also about helping to give parents the information that they need so that they can be the best partner for their children's education.
That's absolutely awesome. So, as you guys realize, we have two very knowledgeable people here with us. I just love the fact that they're into science, right? So, I'm gonna start. So, today's show basically is about we're talking about education during the pandemic, with the lens of focusing on Black and brown kids, right? Inner city kids, just our communities. And one of the things I kind of wanted to touch on, and let's start with the process. So we're not going to talk about the schools. We're not naming the schools that you guys work at, but we we just want to talk about what has the process been like at each of your schools. So we're going to start with Shanna first, and then we're going to go to Sharon. So what has the process? What is the process like? The current process of or what is the system that you guys are using? Because I know there's a few different system
so
types.
Everyone is, I want to start off by saying every school is individual. So administrators were given options of different models to choose from, and they chose a model based on the size of their school community and what they thought would work best. So what's happening at my school is definitely not happening at every single school. And so some schools have different versions of the hybrid schedule. For example, where you have a third of the students coming in each day in person, and then they rotate through. And so right now what we have is our students are rotating through a 3-week cycle. So there's like an A day, A, B, C, and then it rotates throughout every 3-week cycle. So one group comes into the building, the 2/3 are staying at home and working remotely. So that's the blended model. That's blended students. And then we also have students that are 100% remote who are not coming into the building at all, and all of their instruction is happening online. So there's variations of that, but most schools are doing something like that. But what's really important is not so much the model that they're using, but how their instruction is being delivered, particularly the remote instruction. In person, they're in school, there's with a teacher, even if it's with a smaller group. But what's really happening with the remote portion, that's what parents really need to find out. How many teachers do they have? How often are they seeing their teachers? If they receive special education services, how are those services being delivered to their students? Those are some of the important questions that parents should be asking their schools.
Okay, and Sharon, for at your school, what is the process like, and what model did your school choose to use?
Well, right now we're separately located. So we have a middle school and a high school. The middle school is co-located. So that's also something that parents should be asking if their school is located in a building with other schools. Like what has been the communication amongst the school leaders? Is the whole building following a plan? Is each individual school doing their own thing? Because that will affect the outcome of every person in that building. So one of the things that we've chosen to do is go fully remote. So we've been fully remote since March, really making sure that our children had the technology. So we had pickup times, making sure that each one of our students had not just a Chromebook, but if they were in an area that did not have internet service, we were able to provide them with hotspots so that, that's something also that we need to take in mind when we're dealing with families, that not everyone has the top of the line cable internet package. And some of them are really working on the basic, you turn on the camera and the whole thing just freezes.
Right.
We've gone fully remote, and the teachers are teaching a full schedule. So almost as if, a child is sitting in the classroom. We log on every day. We have an hour class. And how the schedule was set up is that we actually have a 90-minute block. We teach 60 of that 90 minutes. And then the half an hour for our general education students is a little break, so they can work on homework, they can get a little, snack. But for our students with IEPs, that is intervention time, so that they're picked up by their SETS teacher. They're picked up by different teachers that have targeted intervention. And then on Friday, it's office hours for the teachers, but again, more targeted intervention for students with IEPs. So again, having parents ask those questions, as Shanna said, making sure that they are aware of how students are being serviced, general education, students with disabilities, just in general, like what exactly is happening in instruction.
So on a weekly basis, I mean, for your model and for both of your models, What are the amount of does it go by the educational hours? Is there a certain amount of hours that you must teach per week, and how does that work with kids who have these short attention spans, right? Like how is that is that feasible? Is that something that's working in terms of the number of educational hours?
I would
We'll start with Sharon, and we do the reverse, right? So we'll start with Sharon.
It depends on the age level. So, one of the things that I worked with this summer with the teachers is really making sure that the teachers knew how to use different engaging programs that would check for understanding. And of course, I would get the FaceTime call right now. Hold on one second. It never fails.
That's live. That's live, people. That's live. That's how you know it's live.
It's my dad calling from the Caribbean to make sure I'm all right.
Tell him tune in.
But it did. So right now I have the older students. So we're doing things that are very engaging and things that check for understanding. So we have data on what the kids are actually learning so we can adjust ourselves. I have children that are in 1st and 4th grade, as well as middle school and high school. So for the younger ones, it's that the attention span is the thing, so what I've seen their school district do is really break up their day. So they're not just sitting in front of a screen for 6 hours, but they are, doing different PE exercises. They're doing music things, and they're including, beats on the table, which is awesome. Awesome. And they're also doing art projects. So, it depends on the age group, but I think, that teachers also have to be cognizant of the amount of time that children are expected to sit in front of a screen.
Yeah.
And what about at your?
So again, like I said, at my school, what's happening in my school may not be what's happening at all public schools, because everyone is doing something a little bit different. Our school day is and I think the school days are roughly about the same amount of time. So from 8:30 in the morning until 2 o'clock, particularly because we're in the building. So even most of the teachers, unless they have accommodations, who are teaching remote, are teaching remotely from the school building. And so we have to vacate the building by a certain time to allow them time to do the cleaning and sanitizing that they have to do each day. So our day ends, the kids' day ends at 2 o'clock. And they have their structure, they have regular periods. It's very different than the spring. In the spring, we had very abbreviated class periods. And now it's basically like a regular day, but it's, most of it is online. Yeah.
And so, on one of the other topics we kind of wanted to touch on, because I have so many things to ask, right? Because I know that there are parents out there that are going to be watching, and a lot of parents are, I know, very frustrated by this the virtual learning, virtual instruction. How much involvement do you think is needed by a parent, and are you finding that parents are involved? Are they being active, or it's just turn on the computer 8:15 and I'll turn it off at 2 o'clock? Or what has it been like for you? And we're going to start with the reverse again. So we're going to start with Chana first.
It's been really complicated for a lot of parents because of the rotating schedule, the switching of days for the parents who are hybrid. And so that's been really difficult. Parents are also not used to communicating predominantly online, mostly via email. So just making sure that we have all the correct email addresses and parents are checking their emails regularly. That's something that's been a little bit of a challenge. And getting the kids used to the technology. So it depends on what their experience was in the spring, how much facility they have now, and they may or may not have the support at home if their technical skills are not that great. So there's a lot of challenges, and it really just really hinges on having that communication and contact with parents. So I spend a lot of my day emailing parents. If I can't reach them by email, calling them, making sure I have correct contact information to keep them constantly updated on what the expectations are, what their children should be doing all day, and making sure that they're comfortable and they don't need support as well.
And as just as a sidebar question, I mean, we know some parents, right, are not that great with technology.
Yes.
And a lot of times it's like, okay, just give it to the kids and they'll do it and give it back to me to figure it out. I mean, how have the children adjusted to the technology part?
So I always say our children are great consumers of technology. And we sometimes think that, oh, they're great. They know how to use everything. And they actually, when it comes to using the tools, and creating things with that technology. They don't have that much facility. So there's actually a lot of what I do with my students is giving them tech skills, how to format an email, how to send an email, what's appropriate language to use when you're emailing your teacher, how to access all these various, so there's tons of ed tech platforms out there. I have to teach them each one how to use it. So how to record a video, how do I create a PowerPoint presentation, how do I upload a picture into my document? So all of those things, we just assume that the kids will know how to do it, and they don't necessarily know that.
What about you, Sharon? What are you seeing?
I think Sean and I are in the same school, but we just on different floors, but we don't realize it. But the same, where I think for parental involvement, it is stressful because of the different schedules, and that was the biggest thing that a lot of the parents pushed back in terms of when we had, surveys. What does the hybrid look like? Because for some of our families, they really don't have that luxury of staying home all day. Some of our families, if they don't work, it's really the difference between being able to pay rent and utilities and supporting, my child. So it's very stressful in that aspect. And in addition to, teaching some of our less techie parents how to use these different platforms, we also had introductory classes on the same thing, how to write an email. Something as simple as don't put everything in the subject line and send it, like that's just a very brief topic. And then this is how you address, and we had them practice, in addition to, making sure that the kids have their support. So one of the things that my school did is they actually created a IT program. So they actually hired an independent company where parents can put in a ticket in case something wasn't working well, or they weren't sure if it was an actual hardware, software issue. So that if it's hardware, it's taken care of. If it's software, it's really getting the teachers to show the students how to do these things and how to interact with something. I use Peer Deck all the time. So that's a very simple program where you can have the kids interact with the slides or whatever you're presenting. And, it's a way to kind of engage. But it is also, there's another added fact for not just parents who may not have the schedule that allows them that flexibility, but I think for parents who are also educators, that is also an added piece where you're supporting your child, but you're teaching your class. And sometimes they're at the same time. So juggling that work-life balance sometimes is stressful. In addition to just making sure that everyone has what they need and has that personal contact. So if it's emailing parents or messaging children to make sure that they know what to do and when to log on. It's been a journey. It's been a journey.
So how much interaction are you looking from parents though? And what kind of interaction, right? Because like you said, they might not be very techie, right? And they might a lot of parents are not. Like Channel said, they're consumers, right? So they might know the Instagram and they might know the Facebook to answer back, right? But they might not know, like you said, in the subject line of they might not send an email on a regular basis, right? They might receive the email, but they might not send those emails. They might not know how to add an attachment to it. It's very simple things that we take for granted because we do it every single day. So how much involvement are you looking, and what kind of involvement are you looking for from parents who are right now, they're frustrated. It's and I think frustration is the most common word that I hear from parents, right? Mm-hmm. We're frustrated, this ain't working, but at the same point, they don't want to they're very leery about sending their child back to school. Right. Mm-hmm. So how much involvement and what kind of involvement are you looking for as an educator, right? From a parent of a student who might be struggling or who, you see needs something.
I'll just talk briefly and then I'll pass the mic to Shauna. I think, we are aware that a lot of our parents are in that mindset. So what we try to do is really make sure that the lessons are very much structured so that from the one-to-one instruction where we're dealing with the students, they know what to do. We, show them how to work the program. So really it's just parental involvement in terms of just making sure that the social emotional piece is okay with the children. Because that's the one piece that I can't really reach through a screen and actually, deal with that way. But we do have our school support team who works with the children in case we're seeing anything, because we're still mandated reporters. So, part of, now having a camera into the home life is also making sure that parents are aware that we can see more than what we would see if the child was just simply in a classroom. So parental engagement basically depends on the age of the child, but I think, we also want the parents to let us handle education piece. Sometimes just, let us do our thing, because I can be a helicopter parent. I admit it. And I tell all of my younger teachers, when I start hovering, just tell me fly away to another airport, please. And I don't take offense to that. But sometimes, we also understand that they're under a lot of pressure and frustration. So we try not to, do things where parents have to be completely involved in the process, but also knowing that, we are there as a partner with the parents as well as the teachers.
So for those of you that are watching on Facebook or YouTube, if you guys have any questions, you can always just type it in and we'll put it up and ask. So Shanna, the same question.
So what do we want from parents is to be involved. It's nice to have parents involved. It's better that they're involved than not involved. Particularly in a remote learning environment, because if they're just, a lot of our students left to their own devices, they'll have the computer open, but they're not doing schoolwork necessarily. So the parent definitely at the minimum needs to be aware of what the students are supposed to be doing, and making sure that they have a routine. Like that's very critical. I have students sometimes turning work in at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. These are 7th graders doing their homework at midnight. So it's really important that they have a structure, daily structure. So that's something that parents really should enforce at home, is that the kids have a structure. They get up at a certain time. This is your school time, and making sure that there's that balance with schoolwork. And then you also have time, non-screen time is just as important, to make sure that you get away from that screen and do some creative things. Physical activity is very important. I actually popped a couple of links. You put them in the chat. Thank you for me.
Yeah, I did.
Which talks about screen time recommendations from the American Pediatric Association, so that parents can really start thinking about how much time children are spending on the screen. And a lot of that is kind of out the window now because we're doing remote learning. So kids are online all day long for school. But then how do you balance it and just make sure that they're getting all those other needs met? The social needs, the emotional needs, the exercise, all of those things.
So one of the tools that I know as a parent that I found helpful. I know that there's a electronic system that you can check your child's progress. You can check your child's grades. And I'm not sure if a lot of parents, especially now, they should be kind of on top of it. Usually they'd wait for like parent teachers night and they'll go in and they'll see it. But a lot of parents don't realize that they can actually check it on almost a daily basis, right? To check to see what your child's progress is and kind of how they're doing right now. Especially, it's been about a month, right, of this virtual learning or hybrid learning or whatever it is. And for some schools, they started going back, I think, in New York City here today.
Yeah.
So I spoke to a teacher before, and she said it was a lot. She doesn't feel it works for the younger kids. And I think I spoke to both of you guys about it because she needs to see how they're holding their pens, because they're now, learning how to write letters. How, as a science teacher, right? What are the things that you find works and what does not work? And just to go back to the question of parents' involvement, how much involvement, right? Like you said, you can be the hovering parent, right? And probably as a teacher, you probably don't want that parent over every 10 seconds. But how much involvement should I as a parent have, like in what's happening? Like, should it be, listen, you have to have your homework done by 7:30? I know you was watching this all day and the screen is in your eyes, but you have to have your homework done by 7:30 and be ready to hand it in the morning. Like, what is, how much involvement are you really looking for right now?
I think part of that is that you hit the nail on the head with checking, and there are various different student information systems, Power School, even a lot of schools are using Google Classroom as a platform. They have a grade section where you can look and see what's been turned in, what's been graded. So I think once the students see that mom is checking on this, dad is checking on this, auntie and nana, everybody in the family is making sure and just checking in, they know that it's something that they have to do. I agree completely with limiting screen time. And a lot of internet providers do have the parental controls where you can shut it off at a certain time. So, once it's bedtime, turn it off so that literally only the parents have the code, and in case they need to do some work after hours. But I think it's very important, as Shonda was saying, to set those schedules, because if they were in school going in person, they'd be getting up at a certain time, having breakfast, getting dressed, going out the door. So we also need to make sure that the kids still stay on that schedule in somehow. And it also will help them to organize their time. And then, I totally agree with Shauna. As I said, we're in the same building. We just haven't met. Let the kids be kids. A lot of, the easiest thing is really to have them move from the online learning to PlayStation. I'm dating myself because I don't do video games, but a Nintendo Switch and all these things. But that's more screen time. Give their eyes a break. I mean, I've bought the blue light blocking glasses for my children because literally they're sitting at a table, watching the screen for the whole day. And in terms of parental involvement, making sure that the children are okay, asking them what they're learning, because a lot of times if a child can explain what they're learning, they're learning it. If you ask your child, hey, what did you learn in science class? And they're like, something about graph, that they may not be making that connection. And then, as a parent, reach out to that teacher and say, hey, is there anything I can do to support or to help? Because a lot of times, we do need that for some of our kids where they just need to hear it again in a different way. And, I think one other point of frustration also is the children now are taught with Common Core standards, which is something that is not how we learned at all. So, even thinking of the math that my children do, I'm looking at going, yes, that's long division. And they're like, no, you have to make a box and put the box here and then bring this over. And I'm like, it's long division. So you also have that piece there. Parents want to help. They look at the work and they're like, what is this? That's an outreach to the teacher to see if there can be a way to collaborate so that the child gets the benefit of hearing two different methods to really get that critical thinking.
Right.
And I have two specific things. One is depending on the platform. So we use Google Classroom in my school. It's not enough just to get those weekly reports that said, they turned in assignments. You actually need to go into their account and actually look at the assignment to make sure that it was completed. So not just that they turned something in, because they could turn in a blank document and it says it's submitted and they did all their work, but they haven't actually completed the work. So that's important. And the other piece is if you are able, so I had a parent who was able to sit, she wasn't there with her son every day, but she was in another room and she was listening to the lesson so that at the end of the lesson, she was actually able to come in and help him when he needed help with the work. So as much as you can be involved in understanding exactly what they're learning and supporting them, both in the terms of the actual instruction, but also in just making sure and keeping track and making sure they're completing all of their work. Those are two of the biggest things that will help them to be successful, along with the schedule.
All right. So far, we had a few comments. Someone says, I'm going to put it up. She says, as a single parent to a kindergartner, she said, this is hard doing this, especially when my child isn't tech savvy, right? She's never had a tablet or laptop in her face, right? So she's one of the rare parents whose kids, they're not in the screen every 10 seconds as a little one. She also said, can some of these kindergarten teachers realize that they're talking to 5-year-olds and not teenagers? And I guess it's kind of hard. I would find it. I don't envy kindergarten teachers right now to have to try to teach, 5th graders when they're not in the same room. It has to be difficult being in the same room, much less being in separate rooms. Someone also said, as a parent, we should have the class schedule and a list of teachers' contact information. That's something that should be readily available, right, to parents, or is it? Okay.
And it could vary from school to school depending on what kind of infrastructure and structures they have in place. So some schools are very systematized. They've got everything ready at the start of the year, ready to go. And then other schools, it's sort of every teacher just does their own way of communicating with parents. And so as parents have power. They have power. So if you feel like it's something that you're not getting from your school, go and ask for it. And, don't tell anybody I said this, but 311 exists for a reason.
All right. Okay. Don't say 311. All right. So people, we have about 5 more minutes because, like I said, this is just 30 talk. So we're only going to be here for about 30 minutes. So I have 2 more questions, 2 more basic questions, right? So how has the students adjusted in each of your, because we didn't get specifically where you guys teach, but you guys have a little variation in terms of you teach the same things, but in kind of different and you have different exposures to different communities. Yeah, guys probably live like 5 minutes away from each other as well, but that's another story. But how have your students adjusted? Because we talked about like the distribution of, and we didn't even get to talk about the distribution of the actual laptops. Is it one per household? Is it each child gets one? And how does that work? And how have your students, right, now adjusted to, let's say, this first week or the first month of home instruction? So we're gonna start with Chad and then to Sharon.
Yeah, so we actually, the students have they started on the 16th with orientation, so 3 half days, and they came back last week full time, all remote. And this is the first week that, well, at least the older kids, the younger kids started last week, but the kindergarten, this is the first week the elementary and middle and high schools are coming back into the school building. And just talking with the kids, it's weird because they have to stand 6 feet apart, walking in lines, and they're wearing masks all day. They only get to take them off to eat lunch, and it's instructional lunch. So they're sitting there while the teacher's teaching, eating lunch at the same time. So it's very quiet. It's the quietest middle school experience I've ever had. And the kids say it's very weird, it's awkward. And they actually don't really enjoy it because a lot of the time, even in the classroom, they're on their devices. So it's not the same social experience that they're used to.
It must be nerve-wracking for the year. Can you imagine being Sharon, what about you? What do you see as their adjustment?
So my students have been fully remote. So right now, I think the biggest adjustments were for the 6th graders and the 9th graders who are new to a school, new to this whole process. And I think they're adapting as much as they can. We try to make the lessons as interactive as we can. For years, I've always had the tagline as the mad scientist because I'm lively because I have my cup of coffee and it's all bubbly. And, I think they're getting accustomed to being on a schedule, knowing who the teachers are. And I think one important aspect that my school did is they didn't really start instruction just all 60 minutes, just complete academics. We made sure that there was icebreakers and social emotional pieces throughout the lesson, just to check in where they are, making sure that they're okay, because we realize that it's different. It's not the same social school that they're accustomed to, where they're all loud in the cafeteria and doing their thing. Everyone is quiet, and it's different. So, and some of our kids are having problems adjusting to that piece. But when they're home, they can kind of relax a little bit and interact with each other. And we give them time to really do things where they're talking with each other via chat, or we have them in breakout rooms and we're doing different, activities. So they're adjusting, but I don't think anything really beats that, everyone in the school, hands-on, that whole social aspect is very important for our kids.
All right. So Cheryl's had one more thing that she said, yes, teachers' contact information is important. She said, because today alone, teachers sent messages on Google Classroom to be on time, but never sent links for class or what work is needed to be done. I ended up contacting her main teacher to try to reach out to the clusters teacher, and that's annoying. So it sounds like a communication issue at the school, right? In terms of for parents. So this is going to be the final question. For those of you that's just logging on, it's only 30 minutes. We can probably talk about this for an hour because I think I spoke to each of you for at least an hour, right? So we can easily talk about this for an hour. But next week we're going to talk about voting, and so make sure you guys tune in about that. We're going to talk about the importance of voting and just voting. Just vote.
Absolutely.
So, but the final question of the day, and before I thank my guests again for coming, this is the final question, and it's a pretty hard question. So, what do you think is the biggest challenge moving forward with the way it currently is with virtual learning? What is the biggest challenge right now? Right. So, we're gonna give you guys a second to think about it. Right. Then we're gonna start with Sharon. Oh, you ready? You're ready? Okay.
I'm
ready. All right, go ahead. What do you think? What do you think is the biggest challenge?
There are 1.2 million students in the New York City public school system. Mm-hmm. Meeting the needs of all the diverse learners, our general education students, our students with special needs, our students with English language learners, and all the different variations of student, and trying to meet everyone's needs when everyone has such a different facility with technology, both on the teacher side and the student side. We have language barriers, we have differences of technical abilities, we have if difficulties with internet access. So all of these different things, just trying to meet everyone's needs in such a large system, that's our biggest challenge. Like, how do we effectively reach all students?
Right. And I feel like a lot of and I wanted to get this parent on here, but I'll get her on here when we talk about autism. I feel a lot of special needs kids are actually being left behind or not properly. I mean, I can see it very easily, them being not adequately educated or not adequately receiving the services in addition to the education that they should get. Especially any child with an IEP, I can see this not working well for them. What about you, Sharon? What do you see as the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is the unknown. So, what happens when we put all these millions of students together, making sure that they're safe in terms of, transmitting the virus and, the unknown, because again, it varies from school to school. So some schools have a policy where they may just lock down that one classroom for cleanings. Other schools may have a policy where they're locking down the whole entire school for a couple of days. And then the biggest challenge is if that happens, and as a parent, you get a phone call saying they can't, for HIPAA laws, they can't tell you who, but you will get notification that, a member of the school community has tested positive. We're closing the school for 2 or 3 days. Now that's a challenge for the parents now, because that's childcare. That's making sure that my job is okay with me taking a day to watch, the ones that can't be left home alone. So I think the biggest challenge is trying to get that scheduling, making sure that everyone is able to accommodate the children, childcare, education wise. And then what happens if this happens on a regular basis? The child goes back to school, somebody else tests positive, they close it for 3 days, they go back to school. So it's a never ending cycle. And I think the biggest challenge is for the administrators to say, when is when? It's like, okay, you know what? Fully remote, this is not working. Or yes, statistics is great, everybody back in. I think that's the biggest challenge, trying to figure out when is when.
When is when? Yeah, that makes sense. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was awesome. This was awesome. I want to thank all three of my guests, well, including myself and everyone who logged in. Thank you, Lord, for making me be able to do this amidst everything that's happening. But I want to thank Sharon and I want to thank Chana. It's Sharon. I want to thank both of you guys. Did an awesome job. And I'm definitely next week we're gonna have Chana back because we're talking about voting. And you're always welcome to join us, Sharon, if you want to. But we're going to be talking about voting and the importance of voting. So thank you once again to my guests. If you guys want to reach out to them, I'm going to give you guys some information on the Facebook, on YouTube as well. If you guys want to reach out to them, if you guys have any questions, if you're a parent with questions, I'm sure that they'll be happy to respond to email, maybe point you in the right direction, right? So thank you guys again. This was awesome. And I'm going to see you guys next time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.